Welcome to Tuesday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. So I'm incredibly sorry for missing out on all of last week's videos and streams. I had a bunch of great ideas, but I ended up getting really sick with the bad case of at GDC. I found out pretty quick that it's kind of hard to make videos when I can't even talk, but I do want to say that I really appreciate you all being here, and I'm gonna make it up to you guys. We got a super mega packed news day today. Everything you missed last week, V51 breaks Beat Saber, hands-on demos of HTC's newest VR device, a huge change is coming to VRChat, terrible sales of the PSVR 2, all while we get probably some of the best news the VR industry has seen in a while. All that and so much more, we got a lot to cover, so let's just get right into the news. Let's start this one off with a really short shout out to practically one of the best VR games I have ever played. Vertigo 2 just launched on Steam VR, and I might end up making a full video on it, I'm not sure yet. But in case you're wondering what the gameplay is in the background, well, it's Vertigo 2. Definitely go check it out. It's certainly newsworthy. It's made by one dude, and we gotta support our PC VR devs out there. But moving on, I think we all know how crazy the entire world has been the past couple months regarding AI.
Artificial intelligence, GPT-4.
Magical AI.
And in all the craziness, generative AI has kind of taken a lot of the VR industry or metaverse thunder. But to me at least, one of the most exciting prospects of AI everything is the crossover between VR and AI technology. How can we use this to make VR better? And well, one early demo shows off probably one of the coolest implementations I've seen yet. Golf Plus showed off a speech interactions model where instead of going through menus to select what you want to do, you have a virtual caddy that you just speak to.
My name is Arthur, the most charming caddy in town. How can I help you today?
And this is one of the most Star Trek computer holodeck things I think I've ever seen. And while this isn't part of the main app yet, things like this are starting to pop up all over the place. Scotty Fox's experiments with generative AI and mixed reality spaces are something that have boggled my mind. Even Meta experimenting with their voice to 3D object AI project just a while back. Even Unity is about to get generative AI built in. Look, for every advance in generative AI, XR and VR gets better as well. I mean, just imagine a world where you prompt your VR experiences or worlds or avatars or even just assets for a game, and they turn out more detailed than anything before it. It's a very interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. And I'll do my best to show the crossover as it happens because we're about to see a lot of really interesting things happen. And I kind of have this feeling that we're about to see this space entirely change over the next few years because of what's happening. And of course, it's happening fast. And now we can move on to a little less existential of a topic before we hit on some of the more fun stuff. This big ol' mod-breaking V51 update and kind of the state of VR right now from Meta's perspective. So I know I've been pretty rough on Meta in the past, and for good reason usually, but to be honest, things are looking pretty good right now, maybe better than they ever have. And I think a good place to start here is with a big announcement that Meta made at GDC, with a report that 40 Quest titles have now reached over $10 million in revenue, and that after analyzing the data, there's a quote-unquote giant correlation between quality and sales, which, yeah, no duh, right? But there's a lot more to that statement than first meets the eye, and it was brutally obvious being at the Game Developers Conference firsthand. And sickness aside, I was actually really happy I was able to see it because VR was everywhere. It was kind of insane. I've never seen anything like it, but that's also because very legitimately for the first time, VR development kind of makes sense from a monetary standpoint, especially if you're making a standalone or PSVR 2 game. Right now, something is happening that kind of hasn't happened before. We're in this really positive cycle moving forward. I'll just give you a quote from the same blog post as earlier. Increased revenue potential on the platform is what's going to drive quality, end quote. And yeah, of course, quality equals more sales, but more sales on a platform actually drives and increases quality. Something that I think we're about to see the fruits of. Basically, if a ton of developers see that decent VR games are making millions of dollars, well, suddenly VR game dev just makes a whole lot more sense to a studio. And this may sound simple or silly, but this whole VR makes sense thing kinda hasn't existed for the entire time I've been in VR. Developing a VR title has always been a massive risk and definitely still is, but right now we're witnessing a shift, and it's a really positive shift. More developers, especially on the indie side, are interested in VR than ever. And to be real, this is kind of a crazy thing to say. You may actually have a better chance of launching a successful revenue-generating generating title as long as it's quality on VR rather than flat screen, as long as you're developing for standalone first. And maybe the revenue ceiling isn't quite as high, but if you can get on the Oculus and Pico store, your floor is certainly higher. And Meta then closed this entire statement with the bombshell that 150 VR titles are currently in active development under Oculus publishers. So, like I said, awesome, lots of new titles, lots of interest from probably the demographic that we need at most, and that's from developers. But not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Let's talk about this update and why you should probably hold off updating for just a moment. First though, I want to take a second to acknowledge just how many updates the Quest 2 has gotten. It's probably the most updated tech device I have ever seen. Its functionality since 2020 has doubled, if not more. But you know, a kind of weird part about all these updates that I haven't really talked about much has been covering them. For a while, it seemed like every update was massive because, well, every update brought something huge like Airlink or refresh rate increases. And it also turns out that saying every update is massive does really well for the algorithm too. But especially the past year or so, I've tried to be really careful about what I deem as a massive update or not. And this is especially recently considering the updates have been relatively inconsequential. And I kind of expected V51 to be that way as well, but there are a few pretty massive things that we do need to talk about. My community post didn't quite cover it all. Of course, the biggest thing visually is global local dimming coming to the Quest Pro, which is actually amazing for the few thousand of us that own a Quest Pro. It almost brings the Pro's LCD panels to the contrast ratio of an OLED display. Not quite as good as something like the Beyond's micro OLEDs, but it makes a huge difference. The bigger part of the update that affects everyone on Quest is the fact that with V51, Quest 2 and Pro are getting an entirely new operating system, moving from Android 10 to Android 12L. And while it's too early to really tell, this could bring some very real performance increases, but it does for sure bring some awesome wireless ADB capabilities, meaning users can now enable ADB without connecting to a computer every reboot. It's awesome for tinkering and side quests. However, there's also kind of a big problem here, and it has to do with sideloading. This update, as is right now, pretty much breaks just about all unofficial modding, especially Beat Saber mods, and it does it pretty harshly. This is mostly due to Android 12L's much stricter app signing and file permission system, and for now, the only way to save your mods is to disconnect from the internet and just not update. I saw a lot of people get really upset about this, but this isn't Meta breaking things, this is a good Android update. Just Android changed between 10 and 12L, so a lot of external apps and modding managers or tools are also going to have to change. So if you are someone that relies heavily on Quest Beat Saber mods or external apps, you should definitely wait to update to V51 until it's confirmed that your apps will work properly, otherwise you're just kind of stuck. And I'll link the Beat Saber modding community down below. They're currently working on an update, but this PSA needs to happen. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what's going on, so hopefully this fixes some of that. But yeah, beyond mods breaking, things are looking pretty good. But now it's time for a beam break! So you may remember the Deca Gear, the supposed index killer from a couple years back that ended up falling apart and turning into, well, kind of nothing more than vaporware. Well, looks like the headset is actually gonna end up releasing soon. This time with micro OLED displays and oh, nope. Looks like one of Megadodo's ex-employees hacked into the official LinkedIn page and posted an April Fool's joke. Sad. But now back to the news. Let's talk about the PSVR 2. Turns out that reportedly the headset has sold significantly less units than Sony had expected. And by less, I'm talking about around 1/10. According to Bloomberg, PlayStation was aiming to sell 2 million units during its launch quarter, and instead, so far, they've only sold around 270,000. That's a lot to miss projections by. But a couple of things. For one, this is just a report. It may not be factual at all. We don't have any numbers from Sony themselves, so I think we should take this with a pretty decent grain of salt. And I think, to be honest, a headline that reads PSVR 2 fails to reach sales targets probably gains a lot more clicks than a PSVR 2 sells a 250,000 units in the first month. When you look at it, there are a lot more people that didn't buy a PSVR 2 than did. And it's way easier to appeal to the people that didn't than the people that did buy it. Still, there are lots of VR haters out there, and sometimes Bloomberg is actually one of them. However, that being said, I obviously want the PSVR 2 to succeed, and I think it will in time. Even now, the devs are reporting healthy software sales, which is good, but playing a little devil's advocate, I can actually see why the PSVR 2 hasn't sold all that well. It's a lockdown platform restricted to only the PS5, which I don't necessarily like. It only has around 40 games or so, and it's expensive. But the thing hasn't even hit store shelves yet. In most places, the only way to buy it is through the PlayStation Store. So IMO PSVR 2 has only experienced a soft launch, and we'll see where it lands in 2024 whenever we get official Sony numbers. But now it's time for some rapid fire news. There's a lot more that happened. VRChat is about to change forever. So love it or hate it, VRC has turned into one of the most popular PC VR and Quest standalone games, constantly breaking records for active players on both platforms. But VRChat recently announced probably one of the biggest changes to the platform yet, bringing VRChat to Android phones within just the next few months, starting with VRChat Plus members. This Android version would share the exact same avatar and world restrictions as the Quest version, and I just find this super interesting. Undoubtedly, this will change a lot of the social landscape of VRChat, but this does bring VRChat to millions of new people once it's open to the public. And I just want to think about something for a second. When you think of the quote-unquote metaverse, the whole base idea of it is interoperability between devices and software, VR or not. And all in all, this is pretty much that. So I'm curious what you guys think. It's a big move that could potentially bring a lot of change, but I think long-term, especially regarding the upcoming creator economy, this is probably good. I just really hope that the minor issue is taken seriously as the floodgates open. So I did actually get a chance to try out HTC's new standalone Vive trackers while at GDC. These things are pretty nuts. They track just as well as Vive trackers, just without the base stations, which is something we have never seen before. It's the first of its kind. And I think this just definitely deserves a video on its own though. This one device does way more than just full body tracking and kind of changes the way tracked devices in VR work forever. But I did want to show off at least a little bit of it. You can see the soccer demo I tried out here and how the tracking quality was shockingly good. We still don't have a price yet or ship date, but Q3 2023 should be it, and keep on the lookout for that video. I'll be going really deep into this and the XR Elite, hopefully sometime this week now that I'm back in action. Apple's CEO Tim Cook again hints at some sort of XR device coming soon, possibly at the upcoming WWDC, even if some reports state that the device has been delayed again. There's a lot of conflicting information right now. Really, the best thing to do is just save and wait. But in this interview, Cook basically tries to sell the idea of AR headsets, stating that he and Apple were wrong in thinking that XR devices like this wouldn't work. At first stating that Apple was against something like an AR headset, but that they are now interested in the market because they believe Apple can own the entire market. Quote,
I'm not interested in putting together pieces of somebody else's stuff because we want to control the primary technology because we know that's how you innovate.
Ooh, watch out, Mark. You might just get cooked when it comes to AR. But we're of course still not sure what's happening, keeping all eyes open. And one more thing just happened like a few hours ago. Eye-tracked foveated rendering is coming to the Quest Pro over Link and AirLink with OpenXR Toolkit. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of foveated rendering, and seeing it come as a proper feature is exciting. I've been waiting for it. Some people may say it's only a 10 to 20% increase, but shoot, I'll take it. 10 to 20% sounds like a pretty good deal to me. And that's the week's news. This was probably one of the most packed Tuesday Newsdays in a long time. Sorry again for being a little late. Being sick really sucks, but really thank you so much for being here and for watching these videos. Taking some forced time off actually felt really good. But leave a question of the week down below and I may just answer yours next. Join in my Twitch stream happening today. There's actually even more that I couldn't fit in here that I'll be going over on Twitch. And of course, I want to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially my megas. I couldn't do any of this without you. Don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Much love, Thrill out.